If the Obama administration does decide to slow the U.S. exit from Afghanistan, that's something the new Defense Secretary Ash Carter now suggests might happen. If the U.S. does decide to make that move, it may be the case that the American public is more open to the possibility than you might think at first. This poll you're looking at right here asked about ground forces to combat ISIS, not the Taliban, but still a majority of those surveyed by CBS News this week say that they favor the U.S. sending boots on the ground into Iraq and Syria to fight ISIS. That is a 10-point jump since October. That's also an 18-point jump just since September. Similar results in the NBC News Marist poll conducted just a few days earlier, with 54% there saying that they want their member of Congress to vote to authorize military action against ISIS. So here we are, nearly a dozen years after the invasion of Iraq, even longer since U.S. forces began attacking Afghanistan. And here now, attitudes seem to be shifting in America, with a nation that was war-weary not long ago, growing more and more comfortable with the idea of sending troops overseas, sending troops to the Middle East. So what does this mean for America's role in the fight against ISIS? Joining me now are two members of Congress, Democrat Jim McDermott of Washington State, Republican Bob Dole from Illinois. Thank you both for being here this morning. And Congressman McDermott, let me ask you that. The American people seem to be shifting in a direction of a little bit more of an interventionist direction here. Do you agree with that shift? Is that something that you yourself have felt as you look at ISIS?
I'm very uncomfortable with it. In 1991, George Bush led us into the Gulf War. In 2001, George Bush II led us into that war. And now we're talking about an extension which goes beyond the end of Obama and into the next presidency. Suppose it's Jeb Bush. Okay, we'll have the third Bush war. The real question is, what is going to happen that's going to end with a sentence that says, after this happened, the troops came home? When will we have success? It's not in that AUMF.
Yeah, so on that, this is the authorization that the administration submitted to Congress for the fight on ISIS. Is that something right now you'd be voting against?
I would be very uncomfortable with the one that's on paper right now. It's going to go through a lot of debate and a lot of action in the Congress, so I can't say what exactly I'm going to do, but the one that's on the table right now, I'm not supportive of.
Congressman Dole, let me ask you about that. What is your appetite as a member of Congress when it comes to boots on the ground to fight ISIS?
Well, let me just certainly say that in hearing from my constituents, there's no question that people are starting to say this is an extremist organization that is beheading people. And frankly, when they threaten our president, when they behead an American, they are an enemy of the United States and of our allies. And I do think that fatigue cannot be something that we take into account when we talk about our national security.
So how do you look at this authorization the White House has submitted? Again, it's sort of a working document, I think, maybe at this point, but how do you look at it right now?
Yeah. Well, I look at it as it's actually too narrow from my perspective. If we're going to try to put, if we're going to put men and women in harm's way, we need to make sure that we're giving the president all the authority to do whatever's necessary for what may come up. And I think the AUMF, the authorization for use of military force that has been presented, is actually too narrow at this point.
Well, that's an interesting, we're sort of the gap here between both sides. This doesn't necessarily break on predictable partisan lines, but you have one side that says maybe this is too much that they're asking for, another side that says, as Congressman Dole just did, too little. So, Congressman McDermott, let me ask you, is there a scenario, is there something the administration could have put on paper, is there something you could hear in terms of intelligence, in terms of strategy, that would make you more comfortable with a more expansive commitment?
I would have to hear an awful lot about who they think ISIS really is and how do you fight an ideology. Protestantism has many kinds of Protestants. The ISIS is a part of Islam. It is an ideology, and you're fighting an ideology. And that is very hard to put down. That people believe in that. They're willing to give their lives for it. And when we walk in there, we better understand exactly who we're going to fight. Because we're not going to the Second World War. We're not going to Korea or Vietnam or any place else. We're going against an aspect of Islam that is very dedicated to what they believe. And I think it's very hard to construct a way in which we can go in and wipe them out.
What about that idea, Congressman Dole, that you can't defeat an ideology with a military? What do you think of that?
Well, listen, defeating an ideology is absolutely very, very difficult, as my friend from Washington's noted. But what ISIS does have is they have a set territory. It's now they're controlling about 6 to 8 million people, and they draw some of their power actually from those resources that we actually do have a defined area, unlike al-Qaeda. So I do think that we've got to, when I talk about the use of military force and giving the president all the options, and we want to make sure that all the options are on the table if we're going to put men and women, American troops in harm's way. So that's going to be up to the president and the commanders on the ground in terms of what the best use to achieve victory is. I would agree that I'd like to see more about what that strategy is, because I don't want to put men and women in harm's way without a clear path for victory.
And what are you hearing from your constituents? Because we show these changing poll numbers. I'm getting the sense that the stories about the beheadings, just the nature of ISIS, has changed sort of the psychology of this country as it relates to troops and to war. What are you hearing?
Well, that's exactly what we're hearing. What I'm hearing on the ground is that, you know, when you march 21 Egyptian Christians down to the beach and behead them, when you behead journalists, it certainly starts to change what people realize, that this is absolutely going to be something that comes and impacts the United States. Secretary Clinton, Secretary Panetta, General Dempsey, and then Secretary Hagel all have come out to say that this is you know, an organization that we need to step up and do something about. They encourage the administration to take action earlier. This is absolutely something that the United States needs to take a leadership role in, and we need to act now.
All right, Congressman Jim McDermott from Washington State, Bob Dole from Illinois. I appreciate both of you getting up this morning. Thank you for that. And still ahead, the mayor of one snow-covered upstate New York City is going to try to convince us to visit there in the dead of winter. Really wants those tourism dollars. Next, we're going to go live to Dallas, where there isn't any snow on the ground yet.